Hello, in today's video I will be demonstrating how you can use a simple file upload exploit to compromise a web server. Now this is extremely important attacks. Hopefully by the end of this video you will be alarmed to protect yourself and your businesses hosting websites and other platforms and would like to secure the web application against such attacks. Also, this tutorial will serve this. Now let's come here and let's take a look at the server I am running now. This is a simple web application that I'll show separate Linux machine. Now as you can see, this is an option, and the one I wanted to focus on today is the file upload vulnerability, because this is as close as we can come to know. So let's show in real world terms how some hacker can exploit your web server, where you might be hosting a chat room or you want to make your site much more a blog, much more user friendly and interactive. So pictures and other file types to keep them engaged, or maybe you are running a sales of online marketplace and you allow your customers to upload your photo. So this is where this exploit comes in. Now this happens, you don't really put any restrictions like files the person can upload. So in universities and all these places you will see that they only allow for word types, jpgs and other sort of files like image uploads. And this is how now let's see how this happens. So let's set it to low, where it allows for any sort of file uploads. And this page you will see, it gives us, it's a very normal looking, a normal common standard practice that you will see a page where it tells you okay or not upload a file right here. So this is where they attack you. So they're gonna come to my window first, just increase my privileges, and sorry about that. Now we're in terminal 2 here, so we can work easier and it's all up observable. And the sizes for this, what I'm writing, this is the first thing we need to generate a file which would include our malicious web code, and in order to do this called msv venom. And what this does is you have to give the arguments would suggest what kind of payload this is, because we're going to be exploiting a website. We know it runs on a php, so we're going to format meterpreter, and that we're going to use example to gain access towards it, and reverse tcp, your protocols. TCP basic protocol used systems to connect with the internet. UDP is used to load videos, and those for video streaming services or for video calls, access the web. So simply he's gonna tell the localhost is basically my IP address. So you can check that out simply using ifconfig, and you will see that IP address is available right here. So I have to provide them to the IP address. The shell has to connect back. It can be any number I want, but usually it's a good practice to not choose a port. Reversed for other applications, then I simply tell it the format I want is raw, and the output of the file I would like to have should have called harmless php. You'll see in a bit. Now meanwhile that's been generated, I want to open my msf console. This is the program we'll be using to start our netcat listener, which will basically be ready to accept any connections that would be coming hopefully from the web server. Now that our harmless php is generated, I just want to show you guys how a virus even look like, especially in layman terms of virus, but what with the proper term is basically what it's called, and you will see that it provides the IP addresses of wherever it has to connect to, and to port it has to connect. The rest basically is command for the web server to execute so that the connection is made there, and I can use that to connect back to myself. So let's just close this. I just want to show you guys now that we have our harmless.php file. Actually, I just want to do one more thing to make it a bit more. I'm going to go to desktop YouTube, and I already have a folder called dvwa, and let's just move my file harmless.php into my current folder. Now if you will see, I have harmless in my current folder, which is desktop YouTube dvwl. Let's just clear this. Now if I come back to my msf console, I would want to open a listener shell. So the commands for that is use exploit multi-handler. Then we don't want a generic payload, so we are gonna set our own payload, which was a PHP interpreter and a reverse TCP. Now that this is done, all you have to do is set the localhost, which is our IP address. Dot what was it 19? Let me just check. Yes, it was 19. Just clear this, and and the in and port. So I port is going specified in the payload. Now I'm simply going to run this so that it's running, and I'm going to come back to my page. So this is that was the process of creating the virus, like some would say, or the payload. Now I'm going to do is just like normally open a folder, and I'm going to go to upload this file. Now again the first thing, and it's been successfully uploaded. Now the first thing I would like to point out that you can secure this even if you allow people to upload any sort of files. There's still some measures you can take. So take to secure your platform. First of all, never show the person where the file is being uploaded, because then the person can simply go to that place, execute file. So although they'll be able to find out through other tools like to buster and all that, you should never make it easier for the hacker, right? So look at this. Apparently we can't go there. Let me just see what's wrong. So we're here to TVWA, and I guess that was hackable. After sorry about these things, they happen. Okay, so we're here in index of hackable uploads. Now when a second measure that you can take to upgrade your security is that even when you are uploading files to your system, to you never want to files uploaded with, you should always have your internal indexes or some form of string formatting that would name the files according to your preferences. So it could be today's date or something, or it could be some
Because of that, even there is 100 files saved here. If I am the hacker and I know my payload is in this file, and if it's named the same way, then I can simply come here and click on this. But if, for example, your program saves those files under some other name, then it would be really impossible for me to go and find the file which is actually harmful. So all I have to do now, because the contains the virus, I need to click it. And if I come here and click it, you will see right over here that it got a connection. It was listening on my own IP addresses at 9000, and suddenly it did get another connection request from 192.168.100 on this port. And now I have spent a material penetration. What does this mean? This means that I can show you. If I do assist info, I basically own that machines. Now it's showing me that I'm running at that. I've been able to Linux machine named SDQPy point working directly. I can see where the dictionaries are. I can show all the processes that are running at the moment. And I literally own the machine. And then the part is for some of those hardcore Linux users. Deploy a shell over here. You can deploy a shell, and as you will see, this is also a shell. And we can even use this command to know stabilize the connection. And this is simply Python command. We import this module called p type, and then we tell pty to spawn another command, and that would be bin bash. That's the Linux shell. And what's the command will do, it's going to open a bash shell on the target machine. And now the connection is fully stable, and we can use these things like a normal Linux shell. So now if I do who am I, or sudo, sorry about that, sudo, it's gonna show us all things we can do with sudo. And another additional point that I'll give you guys is there's this other thing you can use is term and x term, which will give us functionalities in our shell. So now, okay, so it's still asking for the passwords, but we have infiltrated that machine. But let's adjust for the sake of this video. So if you import extern, now our shell has more commands, and we can clear the things and all that. So I hope you guys found this interesting, and in the next video I'm going to show if you even have higher security in place, we shouldn't allow to upload any sort of file. Rather, you can only upload a word or a jpg file like most of the blogs do. I'll be even show how you can do that, and then hopefully learn how to save yourself against such exploits. So thank you for watching.
we're going to pull down the contents of it's a horse name, but this time we're going to do it with an image file upload, which is really cool because up to this point, if you've watched the other videos, we've just been using XML based on requests that go on between the client and the server, but this time we're actually going to upload a file that contains our XML exploit, and then that's going to be personal on the server later on. So yeah, to begin, the lab tells us that it's using this Apache library in order to process the avatar images. So before we're diving in, I want to take a look at what Google has to say. We come across this blog post by Incinerator where they were able to exploit an XX eval inside of this Apache library. So this is a super awesome lab, a super awesome blog post to read, but essentially we're going leverage this payload that they provide to actually perform the exploit. So to get started, we'll head into the lab and I'll show you where the vulnerability exists. View a post here. At the bottom we'll find the comment section, and in the comments section we have the ability to have a comment provide a name, but this is where the actual vulnerability is in this avatar, because we can browse and we can upload an svg image type, and since that image gets parsed as a XML code, we actually can control whatever it is that gets executed when that is get parsed. So what we're going to do, we're going to create our own svg image file that contains this payload. So I'm just going to copy the contents here. I have already got a file on the desktop. I'm just going to open this up with the notepad, and we'll just paste the contents right into it. Let's just analyze it a little bit and see what's going to what we're doing here is we're creating the entity called XXE, and that's gonna pull down that we specified. So it's case pulling down stay password for the sake of the lab. We just want to pull down the host name, so it will make notification. We're doing some more work to give it with width and height at all that good stuff, but the part that's actually really executing is right here. What we're doing is we're basically saying saying take go ahead and run the entity that we declared earlier, and take the contents of that and create that as a text file onto our image, or I guess embedded that as text into our image. So what's going to happen is we're going to upload this file. It's going to pull down the contents of host name, and then we're going to be able to see that as text within our avatar image. So we'll make sure we save this here, and then we'll just close it out. If we head back into the web app, we'll leave a comment, and that says like a subscribe, which is great advice. By the way, recommend it. We'll throw in infinite logins as the name. Will grab our image, we'll drop that there into the avatar field. Then let's go ahead and you know example any email.com here, and we'll post our comment. So that should be through nice. We got our comment posted and then submitted. So if we head back to the blog, everything worked correctly. We should be able to scroll down, and we should be able to view the contents of our image. and actually be able to see the host name. Now in this case our width and height values were just way too, I think, too large, so let's go ahead and make a quick modification here on our file. And I should have done this in burp repeater, because then we could just redo our request, but it's no big deal. It's let's change this down to 128 pixels, and just to make sure this is large enough, expand that is to 128, just to be sure. So I'm going to save this out, and we'll just go ahead and resubmit this. Throw that in cool. We'll try it again, and it's successfully down, and head back to our blog. Nice, that looks to be much more legible. So I don't know if this is being cut up or not, so let's just go see if we can try to solve the lab and make that work. So I'm going to duplicate this, and then we'll hit back, and we'll submit our solution here, and it looks like that's 8a. I'm going to split this into two just so I can actually see it. Okay, 8a3 def for our 4 dvd. Bam, we popped. So this is it. Hope you guys liked the whole course, and thank you for watching. Hello, in this video you will learn what malware analysis is and how you can perform dynamic and static malware analysis. So welcome to this video, and it is cyber sudo. Now let me tell you something, that a malware analysis about some dynamic and static malware analysis. Now malware analysis is the process of understanding the behavior and the purpose of a file or a URL. So let's say that you have received an email from someone, and this email includes a file or a URL, and you want to check whether this file or URL is malicious or not, and this is where malware analysis come into place. Now there are two categories when we are talking about malware analysis. The first category is static analysis, and the second one is dynamic analysis. Static analysis is a method of analyzing a simple or a file at the state it presents itself as without executing the file. So back to the example, when we received an email from someone we don't know that includes a file, in the email what we can do is download the file and do not execute it. Now there are many ways to perform static analysis on a file, something like signature based detection, or permission based detection, or a source code review. So dynamic analysis essentially involves executing the simple or the file on your machine, and then observing what is going to happen. Now this is of course not safe, because this file could be a malware or could be a ransomware that ends up encrypting all of your files. Now back to the previous example, when we have received an email that includes a file, what we can do a dynamic analysis is to download this file, but this time we are going to execute it, and when we execute it we are going to monitor how this file actually behaves on our machine. So something like what IP address this file is trying to connect, or what register keys this file is trying to create or modify on your machine, or whether this file is trying to download something from the internet. Now, it's not always necessary to download and execute the payload on our machine. Instead, we can use some online services that are called online sandboxing that allow us to upload our file that we think is suspicious to its server, and when it will perform the dynamic analysis for us, and this is going to be much safer for us, so we can see what IP addresses the file is trying to connect, or what register keys is trying to create or modify, and so on. So now, without being said, let's start our video. Now I'm going to start with static analysis on Windows, and then we can move and use static or dynamic analysis on Linux or Windows. So here we have a file that's called image, and it has an icon that seems like an image, and the title could be not image, instead it could be something tempting so that you can click on it. And as you know that by default Windows what hide the extension of this file, so you can either go and view the hidden extensions by changing the settings, or you can simply right click on it and go to properties, and you can see that the type of file is exe. Another thing you can do is to use a hex editor like AceXD that I have downloaded and installed it online. This is it, and drag and drop the file to it, and you will see that a decoded text here says this program cannot be run in DOS mode, which means that this file is unexecutable. Now of course this file could be a backdoor that the moment you click on it you will get an image, but it's actually an executable file So this also one of the ways to check whether this is an image or any type of file, or whether it's a, whether it's an executable. Another thing we can do is to extract the strings that are inside this file, and we're going to do this is Linux. I'm not going to do it in Windows because I haven't installed the string tool that will allow me to extract all the strings that are within the executable file or this image. Another thing you can do is that you can extract the hash of the file and then check online whether this malicious file or not. So I have installed a tool called hash type. I'm going to put its link in, and when you go to properties you are going to see the file hashes tab here, and when you click on it you will get this md5 hash of this file, and the s is one hash of this file. So what you can basically do is copy the md5 hash and then go to a website like Bristol and go to search and paste the md5 hash. Now of course this is only a file that I have created. Nobody scanned this file, that's why it's not suspicious. So this is not always reliable, malicious or not, but assuming that you have received an email that could be spam email, and this email has sent to hundreds, thousands of people, and then people downloaded it and executed it, and then the antivirus reported that it's a malware, then all the results will also be shared with Bristol. So when you copy its MD5 hash and then put it in Bristol, you will get your result because it's a famous malicious that's been detected by various antiviruses. So, for example, when we search for the 1RC hash and we put it in virtue total, a completely different result. So let me share it for it. So this is the service that runs when you execute the 1NC, and when we copy the MD5 hash and then go to virus total and then put it here and then hit enter, as you can see it's been detected by 60 antiviruses out of 65. You can also see some more information like the SVE, what it's an exploit long slaves micro create, and you can read much more about it and what the antivirus is categorized this file as now. You can extract this file hash just by using the partial. You don't have to use a tool to extract it for you, although it's much easier than using the command line. So to do so I'm going to open PowerShell in this directory, and the command that we are going to use is called search until, and then we have to specify the file hash and then the file name which is called image, and then the type of the hash we want to extract, whether it's md5, sh1, sh8, 256 or many more. So I'm going to say md5 and hit enter. So I have got an error because it's not file hash, it's hash file. So let me say hash file, then hit enter, and as you can see this is the md5 hash of the file without using any tools. Now we are on Linux, and what we are going to analyze is this file on the desktop, which is called text.exe. So all we have to do is go to our desktop because
It's on our desktop and similar to Windows. The first thing we are going to check is the type of the file. Now we already have the extension here, but assuming that the extension wasn't displayed, all we have to do check the file type is by typing the file command and then text me who is the file name and then enter, and you can see that it's an executable file. Another thing we can do is type head, will show us the first part of the file when opening it with a notepad. So I'm gonna just type head and then I'm gonna type its name, which is the test me, enter, and when we scroll up you can see that this program cannot be run in DOS mode. Now assuming that you have received a file and this file ends with JPG and it looks like an image, that doesn't mean that you have to execute it immediately. It's very important to check what strings are included in this file, just like this we have seen right now, which means that this file is an unexecutable and it's not an image. So when you check on it you will get the image. Payload is going to be executed on your machine in the background. So by using the file and hit command we can determine whether it's an executable or an image. Now in Kali, if you want to use the hex editor, all you have to type is hex editor. It's pre-installed, and in the name of the file which is text me, enter, and as you can see we have the same text as we have seen before, which is the program cannot be run those. Now I'm going to say Ctrl X, and now let's see how we can extract the hash of this file on Linux. So to do so, it's very simple and easy. All we have to do in order for us to extract the MD5 hash, for example I'm going to type MD5 and then sum and then the name of the file which is testme.exe, and this is the MD5 hash of file. Now if you want to extract the SHA hash, you can just type SH1 sum and then test me, and there is the hash. So you can copy this file hash and put it in virus total to check whether it's a malicious or not, and you can of course upload it. If you don't want to extract the hash, another command that I think is useful is by extracting by strings. So we can just type strings and then the name of the file, and there are all the strings that in this file without the give breeze that we have seen it before. So there is a lot of tricks, and if you have noticed anything suspicious you can search for it online to see if this file is legit or not. Now let's assume that we have received a file which is the https.exe, and I know it looks very suspicious, so I'm going to open it. I won't default for this. This is only payload that I have created using MS Venom in your area. Could be like an image with a JPG extensions or file that you can use it to install a certain program, but this is only a basic example on how you are going to use dynamic analysis on Windows. So as I said before, dynamic analysis involves executing the file, and this is what we are going to do, although this is dangerous and I do not recommend it if you are not like very familiar with malware and malware analysis. I am just learning malware analysis just like you, and I am just trying to share what I have learned for so far. So we have a file that we think is suspicious, so we might copy it or download it in a virtual machine and then run it, and now it's running. So what we can do right now is that we can open a program like process hacker that you can do download from the internet, and you can see that this program actually runs in the background. So when we go to task manager and then details, and then we search for it, here it is, it's running in the background, and it's this, and description is approach. So if you have searched for Apache bench, it you will see that it's a normal service, but this is not service, it's actually hiding or hiding bench command utilities. So what we are going to do right now is to open a program like TCP view, and this will allow us to see all the connections that the processes are making. So let me search for the program is https.exe, and I'm going to stop it and only view the IP version 4. So here it here is its http.exe. In it's haven't any connection. The hacker actually, this is a payload, and this is the search IP addresses, which is our IP addresses right now, and it's trying to connect to this IP address. You can see it's under the remote addresses or port 666. And of course, if this is program that's only used to install a program, then why would it connect to the internet? So this is one of the indicators that you can keep in mind, that if a program doesn't need a internet connection, then why it's connected to the internet. Another thing we can do instead of executing the payload or the program or the suspicious file on our machine is that we can upload it to online sandboxing services that will execute this file and analyzes how it behaves, and then it will give us a report. And one of the most famous websites are any run and a website called hybrid analysis.
So here is the first website. You can just upload your file and then say analyzes. It will take like 5 to 10 minutes until it gives you the full report. And this is the second website that I think is also very good. You can register on it and then you can use it. You can't use a temporary email, so if you try to use a temporary email, this won't work. You have to use a noun email service, and I have already uploaded the file, our suspicious file, to these websites. So let me show it to you. So here is the result from hybrid analysis. The first thing is going to do is that it's going to give us a full report on how this file actually acted. Now we can see the threat score is 65 out of 100 or 100, and the antivirus detection is 83, which is very high, and it's labeled as a backdoor, and you can see that it's malicious, and it's also detected 4 indicator for compromise. And when we scroll down, we can see these are the malicious indicators. One is that it got detected by CrowdStrike analysis, is that it sends network traffic on a port typically used by IRC and uses network protocol on unusual ports. And then scroll down, see some information of the file like the version information, the description of the file, comments, or many more.
You can see the company's name is Apache, which is a very well-known company, and this is actually payload. It's not a file from Apache. And when we scroll down a little bit, you can see that it's trying to connect to this IP address, which is host or this port number. Now if we want to the second website right now and uploaded our sample executed, what happens? So if a program was a backdoor, then we might see that what got executed in here, because it's only pilot, it's not integrated when anything, because it's actually running in the background of the operating system. So when we go to connections right here, you can see that it doesn't make any HTTP requests, it's a zero. And in connection, you can see that it's trying to connect to this IP address multiple times on port 666, as you have seen before. And we have also two DNS requests. First one is this one is this one, threads in here. Now when we look at the right to the corner, we can see the hash file. We can also see that it's suspicious activity. And when we click on the IOC, which is indicators of compromise, we can see that it's trying to control to this domain, and it's trying to make a connection to this IP address. Another thing we can look at, which is the attack matrix. So when we click on here, we can just see the registry queries, and you can see that the program reads the computer name and check the supported languages. On the left side, you can see a detailed description of what this technique is or why this registry key is used. Another thing we can do is that we can download the text report by clicking on the text report here, and you can see that has suspicious activity and the name of this file. And then we can read the file for a report generated by the website. In here you can see the modification events, so all the changes that happens in the registry keys. These are all the changes with the operations of write. And here you can see the IP addresses is trying to connect to this specific port. This was a basic introduction in how we can analyze a file that we have received by email or we have got it in a USB drive. Learned the basics of static analysis and dynamic analysis. I hope you like this video. Hope you guys liked it, and thanks for watching.
Hello guys, hello everyone. Today I want to show you what is SQL injection and how to prevent seal injection attacks in PHP using MySQLi prepared statement. So let's go. I have already created database and the table named users with some data and a connection and the connection file to this database. So we just need an HTML form for making a login page. So first I create a login page. Input type text for username and password and submit. This is a button. and password is a text box. Okay, now we should create a PHP file for target of this form. For example, simple dashboard. At first we check that he said post username and passwords. Of die. Okay, now I record database connection file in config directory and storing posted data line variables. Our passports in the database are hatched, so I hash again the transport so we can check. Similarly, the data user sent and data are stored in the database. And the database showed passport. I use MD5 for create hashes passport. Some comment. Okay. SQL query. SQL query from users for username, and password I should pass. Commas like really connection, and this is a really connection and SQL. Trains every now it equate. Okay, this file is complete and I run like in that is HTML. Okay, some page holder and some child maybe. Sometime you maybe you're better. It's right. That's I. It's right. Okay, then that's a use first raw data for login password and username. And our password and usernames are similar, and this is the high value of this username. And this is the high value of this username value. Okay, I forget set action and post method, and let's try this. That's true. It returns. This page returns the value of the first row in the database. Now let's check the incorrect one, and nothing's showing us. Let's check something here. In this page, insert tag code or 1 equals 1 or again, and tag code again and password field is not very important. Insert 1 to 9 and hit enter. Here you can see that all data that all data were saved in database sharing. So while I didn't insert any query information in the fields. And why did this happen? Why did this happen? I see you because of this page. This is a part of a SQL query that I insert, and if I copy and paste here, you can see that all of this is a correct query that can run and make different results. For us, this is a field injection. So let's check statement and know how to prevent this type of attacks. I create a new file named to the empty dashboard and use prepared statement here. His question marks and for password and here if question marks and password and here if now we should find use bind param username password are as trying to access and username and I should password and this tmt execute and using as tnt get result in variable result and while stint sorry results page pass and the results page pass here print again the results and let's check this and change the button action which is action and again now let's in the database first check this username and password what we get and this is the core this is core and for incorrect one this is correct and for that code or 1 equals 1 or again and take codes 1 to name password and this prepared statement can prevent SQL injection and in most cases hello everyone. So now we're going to talk about cross-site scripting, which is one of the top vulnerabilities found in web applications. I'm looking here at the WASP top 10 and 27.17 edition. If you are not familiar with it, go ahead and Google for OWASP top 10, and it's one of the most widely used references when it comes to web vulnerabilities. And on this page it shows the description of something which is called cross-site scripting, and it shows the different threat agents and attacks and attack vectors. Here you can see that this highly exploitable with an expert ability level of 3, and it's so because automated tools can detect it, and most of them can also exploit exploit it. It's very prevalent. Very prevalent. So it has a high prevalence and a high deductibility, and it's you can see here it's found in around two-thirds of all applications, and there's automated tools that can automatically detect it in some technologies from a technical perspective, and it's not very difficult to execute such an attack. It's at level 2, so it's a bit harder than super easy from a business perspective. It's not clear what the impacts are. It depends on the different application. There's three types of cross-site scripting called reflected cross-site scripting, where an application basically outputs unsanitized user input as part of the HTML output, and this is interpreted by the victim's browser and the JavaScript is executed. There's store cross-site scripting, who is basically first requires an attacker to store JavaScript, a piece of JavaScript code in somewhere in like the database of that application, and later the victim loads that page and is infected. And then there's DOM cross-site scripting, who is similar to reflected cross-site scripting, but in this case the document object model, the down of the vulnerable Narwhal application is modified by injecting malicious JavaScript into it, and it's interpreted by the browser. So there's different ways of preventing this, and again a WSP has an awesome cheat sheet that shows you how to prevent it in very different ways, adding one on top of the other. And there's also the content security policy, which is a defense in depth approach to protect against cross-site scripting. So if we just take a look at the cheat sheet we open here, just basically vulnerable web application written in JavaScript, which is an Angular application and also uses Node.js and a whole lot of auto check other technologies, and it's meant for training purposes. You can basically clone the code from GitHub and then start playing with it. So for this video I basically cloned the code of juice shop from GitHub,
and I have it here in my code editor. So I basically cloned the code here and I was able to start it. So just an interesting tip is that if you are on npm, it's gonna run the application. So it's running it on port 3000, which means I can go 3000, right? And here's the juice shop. I can click on different products. I can see give out page. I can go back to the main page. There's an account and login register page. Okay, so the first challenge in this application is to find the scoreboard, which you can find by entering school reward. And here you can see there's different challenges. The first challenge that said the scoreboard is to find the scoreboard and page, which is quite easy to find, so I solved that. And I also looked at the cross-site scripting attack, or I basically took you need to take this piece of code here and to find some text field in the application where you can input this and create an attack, right? So the first thing I saw the search field. I'm gonna put it here, and this is pop-up showing the message which I typed inside of this JavaScript alert message exercise. So that shows that the application is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, just to show you that this is not, this can be changed. So right here, whatever, and then whatever comes up in the pop-up, right? So this is a dangerous because attackers could just change this alert to sending something like the like your cookies contents to their remote server, and this way they could steal your credentials or your cookies. You don't want to just fix this. What I notice here is that when you input, this is the text field and it appears here in query, and it appears with some URL escape characters, but is basically ready to execute. So what we should want to do is sanitize this input, and here no longer appears in the query. Over here, and one way we could do that is looking at the OWASP cheat sheet for cross-site scripting, and of course implementing all the different rules. But on the other hand, we know that this is juice shop application is an Angular application, and I am suspecting that Angular has a way to sanitize inputs. So if we look for Angular, you are gonna find something like DOM sanitizer for Angular, and you can see here how to prevent cross-site scripting bugs by sanitizing values to to be safe to use different DOM context, and this is awesome. So this is a class and it has a sanitize function which can call it return the string. It takes a string and a security context as an input. So let's see a bit more about that. So sanitize is a value for use in a given security context. We can see here security context, there's different security and different security contexts. We're going to use this as HTML for the DOM, and going back here, basically in your application. Alright, so why do we use the function, right? So we know that this is search is vulnerable. I'm gonna go to the application here. So what do I look at? Alright, I need to do for a search box, and for this I'll just type in a search OK 543, and there's a lot just looking through the results. There's a search bar, there's a and almost 500 search result is here for similar tools, and refine the search. Okay, so there's go again here, and in the search bar where basically click to search on enter, there's this function called search which takes in value. So this value I'm beating is not sanitized inside of this search function, so we're gonna look for this search function. So we're gonna look for this search and opening bracket, all for this. There's a bunch of calls to functions, and this is a call another functions. So I'm gonna put a space because you can put a space in between search and the parenthesis. So here's a function declaration inside of neighbor components or TS, and this is our search function, and it takes this input of string value, and if the value is different from empty, basically construct this where it parameters passing it directly the value which is not sanitized, and then it navigates to search and those query parameters, otherwise it just goes to search if it's empty. So what we need to do here is use to sanitize this input value before it's being passed and navigated to right. So we're gonna use the DOM sanitizer, and alright, we can see that DOM sanitizer and Angular is, and the Angular is that this is the package, just gonna copy on it, and I'm gonna go at this top of this file. From that location which I just called me before it's grayed out because it's not being used yet, I need to sanitized this dome sanitizer inside of this constructor. So here's the constructor. It has a lot of things which it's initializing. So I'm just gonna add private. You can pick whatever name you want here, and it's all sanitizer. That's the type of. Alright, so I'm gonna use the sanitizer lower inside of the search function. So here inside of the search function, if the value is not empty, declare a variable called sanitized value, which is of x, right? And basically going to use this sanitizer, and we're going to use the sanitize method as we solve it overall. Right, so this is sanitize method was the one here, and it takes a security context, right? So which we saw was an enum. Let's use context here. Dot, we're gonna use HTML, and then the second parameter, starting that, I'm going to return a sanitized string, which we're gonna use over here, right? Okay, so now this value is not being used anymore. We're gonna use the sanitized value. Alright, we're gonna, the query parameters are not going to be sanitized. If someone inputs some code in, we can see when I saved, it's compiling its compound successfully. So go, it's now running on a different port. So let's go to that, or that is actually the application which is running the fixed code. So you can see it's running here. Alright, I'm gonna copy this code from here, and right now it doesn't work anymore. You can see the query is empty, and just to show you that it is actually works, if you input something legit which is not malicious, you can see there's your name for just one letter, there probably everything contains and 80. But again, if you input that malicious code, which would be something forever, doesn't work anymore, doesn't show the public anymore. So that means that our sanity, our dome sanitizer, is actually doing its job, and it's sanitizing this input value string, right? So that's it. Hope you guys liked it. Hello, welcome to another tutorial, detecting and defending against cyber threats. So, and this is really talking about where threats actors are part by part, like organized crime, state sponsored hacktivists, terrorists, individual hackers, and malicious insiders. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly cover up each one of these, and maybe even talk a little bit about you, what type of this incident, like accidental insiders, malicious insiders, and individual hackers. So watch full tutorial carefully. So first, organized crime. It's really that evolution, I guess, of the smash.
The idea of using cyber and is a very lucrative one. You will you will These organized crime groups also now benefit from the ability to commit crimes across borders, and which does make issues like law enforcement or make things like law enforcement a lot more difficult. When you're talking about cross border and so forth, it's can be less risky because there's the person doesn't for the threat actor doesn't especially. So have to be sitting right. They are often many miles away, and common attacks that we see around organized crime or things like wire fraud. So tracking people into transferring money to other or wrong bank accounts and so forth. We are seeing ransomware, and I will talk about in more detail about this and show you a few little examples of these attacks, and then theft of information such as personal and business purposes. Identifiable information which like date of birth, addresses, name, social security numbers, text numbers, those credit card numbers and sort of things which can be used for identity theft. And I think in addition to this, the money laundering that can happen with the sort of use of things like currency and so forth really kind of lend themselves well to go organized crime. So that's the first one. Moving on from that, we, and the part is second part is state sponsored. Where is that in the middle of the entire screen? I believe it's just you. Okay, should be able to get rid of it. So, and then we have state sponsored attacks, and the Australian Prime Minister had a hit at his press conference earlier in this year, talked about that sort of Australian president and increase in activity. So these are the common attacks like denial of service and data extraction and spifing. But obviously this was over a certain. It wasn't. I think when the news came out, it kind of sounded like it would just happen, but more realistic. It's been happening over a certain period of time, but once again, we're seeing the sort of state government based threat actors often associated with and often associated with advisor and advanced persistent threats, attacking, governments, organizations, and so forth. And so, if we talked about some of these, and I'm thinking of groups like, and they have interesting names that are named by the security vendors, but sometimes it's more, sometimes it is some groups out of that crime and inside China. So, for example, 3 is one of these, also known as Gothic Pandey. Their sort of module operating is around information theft and espionage, and they sort of focus on aerospace consultancy, defense manufacturing mean that's what this sort of things. Threat intelligence is telling us utilizing tools and so on. Like keyloggers double uh, whiz and eternal brew, which I'm sure many of you may know, have heard of, kind of widely used a couple of years back around the sort of cry pitch. You are not paid. You attacks that whole ransomware thing. I believe from memory that was a one of those. It shows a shadow broker because it was a release of some zero-day exploits that came of out that NSA, and so groups like it, APT3, ABT, and 14 and CAP. And so it might be I might be fired. I don't feel right about basically one of this sort of use kind of hockey animals to sort of identify specific countries where you for example, the Russians are known as the bears, so you may APT-29 because you bear the dukes, and also around information threat and espionage. So this is for state sponsored. I guess the difference is different. Threat actors have different behaviors, which I think will be. And the reason saying this now is because as we go into that sort of detection, sort of discussion, we can after next we'll talk about sort of indicators of compromise and things like that. And when we do that, we think about the sort of panda threat actors are going to typically be a lot more quiet and a lot more silent, and they're going to sort of sit and like dominant is therefore periods of time where some of other threats actors like the bear, this this tend to be more of a use more smash and grab techniques, and whilst and they'll use tools like you know cobalt strike and like mimikats and things like that. There's actually a group called berserk bear who is frightens me a little bit, but their mo is sabotaging distraction. There's actually a group, so I guess what we're focused on getting at is there's a different behaviors, there's different types of sort of in things, and different tools and trade. So we'll talk about some of those. IOCS indicates a compromise, and what to look out for, whether that what sort of signatures to search for, and also look at some defense strategies on how to protect, help prevent some of these things from happening in the first place. All right, my next topic after state sponsored, and the topic is hacktivists. So this is pretty obvious there, but hacking for a social or political cause, often associated with groups such as anonymous computer club out a year of Dome Lizard Squad. You probably heard of many of these names, common attacks that they do: defense denial of service information leakage. This short meaning is the DOS attack, and example of that is that it was the hack against the companies in the Arctic, and then basically getting a credentials and dumping them on paste bin, that sort of information leakage, or taking your sites down so that they are no longer work. So obviously knows that threat groups, and obviously one that typically a more targeted towards social or political cause, but no, depending on what industry you are in, very very possible threat. The other one that I'm looking at here is the terrorists. So, and terrorism is interesting, and I think when I'm running IT 534, there's some official in it often. The question comes up around what is cyber terrorism, and there's typically, so cyber terrorism, I guess, and based on and if there's anyone from any of the two last seasons that I ran thinking about cyber terrorism, there's the sort of act of committing terrorism through cyber. So something that insults, something that instills fear, and that might be something like an attack on critical infrastructure, things like the power grids, gas pipelines, water treatment, that sort of thing. And obviously that's very frightening, especially historically a lot of these sort of skater industrial systems are not very well protected and maintained. But the other thing is around funding, and this is really really important for a massive company of tourism, which then leads to more of the scamming and the sort of wire fraud and so forth. And then the third, I guess, play is recruitment of terrorists. And so, as you can see by some of these and some of these pictures that are here, you've got like Facebook groups for, so spreading messages through those sort. So I guess that there's more than one way to look at how cyber terrorism, or to define cyberism, or to define cyberism. The other one, who is the one that we probably think of the most, or some of us are the individual hackers. So the script kid is the lone wolves is, and the pretty threats of the cyber world. So there's opportunities that are, just going out there to try and make a buck, and once again becomes really easy with this sort of borderless transactions, and there is of conducting some of these attacks. And so I mean, obviously it's not going to be a babysitting. They're at computer, and it's, but these are the sort of go through this without going is too much detail. For those that are fairly new, I mean, script kiddies are other fairly unskilled, like sort of hackers, where they're sort of just getting the tools, and they're that the downloading of Kali Linux distribution or a parrot, and you're just kind of pointing and shooting, and they are actually considered quite dangerous, because often when you sort of just doing that and almost mucking around, you can create all sorts of havoc just by not understanding completely what's going on. So often they are associated with disruption and things like that. And then when you kind of step into the more kind of officials or a black hat, and those sort of lone wolf hackers that might create their own exploits and so forth, and typically, and I know I've written many papers and so forth that tries of define these types of rules, but I guess ultimately this is not possible. The sort of black art is really usually motivated by the financial or personal gain. If it's something that's more cause based, I know of almost jump back into that sort of hacktivist basket. Shannon comment inside a threads, that's the sort of meaning malicious insider, and this start to become difficult because this is where you are starting to look at things like behavioral, and in addition to your normal swing controls, but looking at behaviors and analysis of behaviors, and it becomes a little bit more tricky, and but we will cover it up later on. And then in some instances, the whole so planning somebody into an organizing for the purpose of English has act, so they demolish is insiders, and the last one, the insiders, so these are definitely roth of mention. Accidental insiders, I mean, I think that there's probably quite a lot of this. So this so accidental insiders, not malicious, responsible for 34% of breaches reported on the OAIC. They just had a bit of, I think in many cases, or just not kind of, they just some things happened where, and it could be anything from an email autocomplete failed to losing a device and probably not reporting it to the probably most common one, which is clicking on a phishing link. Often these accidental insiders, they have doing things that sometimes, and this could be anybody. Sometimes it might just be a case of the trying to circumvent the way things are because they want to get something done, but if actually creates a bigger risk, and that's where we know is sort of thing about things like shadow it and so forth. And so definitely real risk pretty hard to control. Well, once a pretty hot chicks all over all our control, but they are sort of taking a different perspective. on it because you're looking from the inside out rather than maybe what might be coming inside outside in. So I will basically reported from January to June this year that 34% of breaches reported to this to the IOC. So it's not like someone's just others becomes malicious, right? So it's just silly things like, as I said, it's sending to the wrong, sending confidential data to, and especially with this privacy legislation and regulations, and they are happening where someone might have a file that has PIN it and they sent it to the wrong recipient. So now attribution, for example, and attribution can be difficult to attribute the source of an attack, one of the arguments against hacking back. For example, the SAVE, the Arctic campaign, as you can see here, you know, none of us made it pretty obvious that it was them, but from what a lot of the attacks that I'm seeing when I'm doing these investigations, the modus operandi operandi is the same as is a lot of the source IP information. So they look like they are coming from the same sort of set compromise servers, but I guess one of the key things around the attribution is that, and so, and I've been asked many times around. And now ransomware historically came from a email malware, more recently installed by threat actors on breast systems. Ransom have increased, data exploitation now common. Remember, if they were members like the Lucky Type ransomware that was a few years ago, more recently this has changed, and I think probably the last 13 to 18 months I have started, and this is because email systems are stripping off any of these dodgy attachments. So what's happening now is threat actors are either using phishing or they're using things like being able to see exposed terminal servers, and they're like brute forcing them and gaining access through traditional hacking methods teams. And then what they are doing is they are deploying ransomware on these systems, encrypting the systems, and that's kind of what happened about 12 months ago. And then they sent to ransom. In the ransom was like, but point x of a bitcoin. That was a whole argument about whether you pay it or not. Probably a bit further back, probably about a year or 18 months ago, but now it's more case of encrypted files text file and contact me to know get some decryption, and the attackers are it seemed to be quite polite, and in many instances they'll actually provide some advice on how to secure system for next time. So that's good of them. It is a good of them, so in a really sort of twisted way. But yes, so that's pretty much the quicken was a quick introduction, 45 minutes introduction on this. But yeah, I think just some quick lesson I learned, you guys. So now I'm going to really now one last topic is business email compromise. Usually starts with a phishing email. Threat actor gains access to a user's mailbox, intercepts communications, uses the mailbox to conduct another attack. So business email compromise usually starts with a phishing email, and in short what happens is, and it could be a targeted attack or it could be an opportunistic attack. And so what happens is the threat actor will send an email to a recipient, the threat actor. So the recipient will receive the email that I think it's legitimate, open it up, and what will happen then is they'll probably plug in some login details, which will then get sent back to the great actor, at which point the threat actor then access is the mailbox and then has the ability to look through the mail, intercept and communications, use that mailbox to conduct any additional attacks. And in many instances we'll do something like conducting or fraud, and so I'm just going to go to this next part, and this is for it. Hope you guys liked it, and thanks for watching. Hello everyone, welcome to another course, another video, and this is obviously part 2, detecting and defending against cyber threats, and this is part 2. So I thought it would be useful to sort of demonstrate some practical applications of what we'll be going through today. And so in terms of today, we're going to focus on defense, obviously part of the defense and detection, and as I said, we're gonna split into two parts. But we're going to discussing strategies high level, and the idea is to give anyone that is potentially new or needs a bit of needs a refresh, some I guess some sort of background on some defensive strategies. And then in the second part of tonight's session, we're going to move into a more practical technical demonstration where I am maybe you won't spoil it. I mean, if you have kind of had a look at the slides on the website, you probably see there's some snaky screenshots in here. They're really because sometimes I demo gods don't play nice. They did not this morning. But anyway, let's begin. So in terms of topics tonight, I'm going to cover this governance, technical controls, audit and compliance, active and passive defense. The first one is governance, and we'll get into what these are shortly. Technical controls, which obviously you probably be a bit maybe familiar with audit and compliance, and then talk about some active and passive defense type strategies. So governance, so I guess at the heart of any security program is governance, policies and procedures, security frameworks and standards. And this is where we talk about things like policies, procedures, guidelines, those sorts of artifacts that really determine what the principles are of information security program. And there are many, and I know gives example of typical called policies that organizations will implement now. But generally, having solid policies in place that are approved at a board level are strongly recommended. Having providing guidance of what is and isn't allowed. And what I wanted to talk about, well, and sorry, I will talk about some examples and policies. And once again, if this little bit of content a bit dry, but that's what I thought. I'll put something more exciting stuff a little bit later. And in terms of policies, things like an information security policies, acceptable use policies. These are all the types of things that organizations should have in some way, shape, or form, and should be rewarded on a fairly regular basis. When I say regular, at least once a year. And if anybody has gone down the ISO 27001 journey or is familiar with it, you will know that a big part of that is when it's having policies. And so what I thought I'd talk about is some of the security frameworks that are pretty well or well adopted across the world, uh, or and given the sitting Melbourne. And in Australia. And so the first one, as I said, was ISO 27001, and it's been around since 95, although at the time it was a British standards, I guess, framework, and it became in 2009, so become an internationally recognized standard in 2000. And then there was a revision in 2005, and then in 2013. So so for anyone that's familiar with 27001, I think from memory, there's about 114 controls which are sort of broken up into the sort of governance pitch with policies and procedures, and things like internal audit and support. And then there are lots of lots of second part for that, which is what they call and which are the sort of things that are used to treat risk. And this is where your sort of cyber sort of controls will sit. Some of you may have some other versions of 2700 are lucky might have seen 2008 edition, and this is almost a new edition. This is actually the same as 2013 for anyone that's wondering, and it is generally just something like a language changed for a particular reason, but it is actually the same thing. It also has some supporting sort of standards like 005 for risk management or 31,000 times also risk management, and there's basically 2700 series. So the next one that's very commonly seen in the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we touched on it a little bit in last part. So the next teamwork is from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, which is a government department that I guess publishes standards for technology used by the US government. But I think I mentioned last week that these standards are they are fairly available and they are widely adopted by private sector and international organizations. I know at last one bank that uses his in Australia that uses the NIST cybersecurity framework as part of their security program. A lot of them use ISO 27001, but NIST is fairly popular, and this just sort of broken down into think its 5 areas, which are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I probably should have done a little spinny wheel, but this is around identifying, protecting against those risks, detecting threats of responding to those threats, and then recovering. So it's a very, I guess, fairly programmatic framework in the way. It works one that is fairly good option in Australia. We have this trillion government information security manual, so I can't remember how many controls are on this thing. I think it's actually sharp. Probably, I think last year are from memory. If anyone knows, feel free to drop a message. And I think it's like 800, so 800 and something, so it's familiar again to probably more closely aligned with the next 853 step framework which is there. There's sort of full security framework that is sort of the big one. It's broken up into the same sort of into fran areas like around audit and around physical access and things like that. So it's a lot more. It also is based around classification of information, and so information classification, for anyone that's not familiar with that, is where you identify how sensitive information is and how effectively like tag or label. So you may have seen, if you have ever received anything from a government agency, you might see unofficial or unclassified, or you might see something like no secret or probably not. But effectively the information security manual is structured that the more sensitive a information gathered is, the more stringent control, the more controls of the more stringent they are in terms of application. And one thing that's really taken up, I think especially in Australia, in the CSC Essential 8, and both a Australian government information security manual and the AC, essentially it used to be known as the Aged Information Security Manual, and the Aged essentially, which is the Australian Signals Director Directorate, which is our signals intelligence agency. And I think in the last sort, and I think in the last sort of maybe the last 18 months they have sort of shifted that around a little bit, and SSC falls under the SD. So this is all for governance. Okay, now let's talk about technical controls like antivirus, anti-malware, application whitelisting, authentication, authoriza- authorization, and accounting, AAA, encryption, IDS, firewall. I would be here all day if I probably put every single thing. These are probably one more common ones. I mean, there are the when I say technical defensive controls, app whitelisting, previously not really widely used. I tried up whitelisting, it was definitely in its infancy and it has definitely a bit of a digester. It's moved a lot since then, and there are platforms out there that and products that do a really good job of whitelisting. As I said, it's the number one control on the ACC essential list. And for those that I think most of you, for all of you will know what antivirus anti-malware is, but at whitelisting, the idea behind out whitelisting is you basically block every executable from running and you whitelist those executables. And software programs, browser extensions, scripts, you whitelist of DLLs, you whitelist them from running based on things like where they're running from the publisher or the particular scene, a digitally sign an application. So for example, Microsoft sign all applications with a certificate to say this is Microsoft has the publisher, or the most common one is a hash. So hashing the particular, and so I'll probably not going to go into defining what hashing is. Hopefully it's been discussed in one of the other courses, but basically it's taking like a, it's not used on cryptography to take a sort of kind of run the fire through the mathematical algorithm to spit out a specific string, I guess, which will always be the same, providing the same value, and the file is the integrity is maintained. So it's not very technical, but anyway, so Apple whitelisting, triple AC authentication, and accounting. This is basically ranks of access control and basically identifying whose user is making sure they have access to the resources and other login options and encryption. So basically doubling everything up, so good period firewalls. So typically on the edge, on sometimes within network segments, so being able to filter traffic towards the use of firewalls, and then the instruction intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems. I don't know why I put systems. I don't know why I put systems in there. That's like pin number choosing prevention system, but having being the detection of anonymous behavior or bad known bears signatures often encrypted into firewall device and blocking threats that way. So anyone have any questions on the technical controls thing going on? If there's anyone the popular, I see the little number up, go for some like 1A is mostly applied is in networking. Is that right? Are there any app whitelisting solutions? Would we need to do it with SCCM? No. So there's a few app while lasting solutions. Microsoft have their own inbuilt a policing solutions called Palaka. So now let's talk about audit and compliance. And inside this, we discuss about vulnerability assessment, ethical hacking, security testing, penetration testing, certification audits and internal audit, and other monitoring and measurement. So alright, whenever a very quick comparison of active and passive defense, just because that comes up, then where we're going to go into the whole demo thing. At first, passive defense. More common controls. Example of passive defense controls: firewalls, application whitelisting, access control, device hardening, antivirus, anti-malware. Are you no, that I think I did that because traditionally defense has been more passive, and then as we're sort of involved over the last, a few years, we're going to moving to, and that doesn't say that there's not to say the passive one is gone for, but now there's this is being argument by adding active defense controls. So passive is the stuff that we sort of talked about before, which is the firewalls, the application whitelisting, the access controls, device hardening. So that someone did post on the forum and see me doing it about the CIS benchmarks, and using those to harden devices and put best security configurations in antivirus or anti-malware. All those some of stuff is now sort of shifting with their sort of advanced and print threat into more active defense. And so might talk about active defense, we're talking about more real-time defense. And so examples of that things like sim, so security information about management. And another part is active defense, so ongoing threat assessment and defense in real time, like examples of passive and active controls. First one is security information and event management. Second one, anomaly detection. Third one, threat intelligence and incident management. So you like Spark, logarithm, quarter, and it's bold. Your detection is so much secure as traffic's going through, identifying something that looks malicious, and then having somebody review that your threat intelligence type exercises. And then finally that incident management to respond. And I guess the thing is, when you look at active defense, the burden on personnel is typically a lot more higher than on passive defenses. So often it requires full time, almost glass, and it's looking at what's going on in terms of when you think about active defense versus the passive stuff, which is just almost same. Not going to say a certain forget, because you can't really set and forget, but it's a lot more than enough passive, and it's a topic. So now I'm gonna demonstrate some app, and this is for educational purposes, which is good because we're learning. but only at home unless you are going to be a pen tester or ethical hacker. Then providing you got permission, then feel free to do that. Well, now it's good time through George to ask about why and quit getting back into your way. Just do it at home. I'll quickly plug your, even though you didn't ask me to, your thesis. Share it in the chat so you can so you can all go and have a look at it. Okay, what? So let's look this demo, and it's a demo. This is the only diagram, so this is just a quick kind of what we are going to go through. So effectively today we're going to use point delicate, and on the left there with a little school on the laptop, that's this was hacker. Okay, on the other side we've got also many as like victim. So what I'm trying to show here is compromised on a couple different levels. So one of those is going to be a fish, and then I'm also going to do just a simple try to exploit a poly patched system. And then what we'll do after that is try and show some, I guess, what was either talk about it or show some sort of strategies to prevent this sort of thing. So in Kali Linux it's looking pretty good, and this is a PAR. So PAR is a Linux distribution, is used for security testing. It contains a lot of tools that are nicely categorized. I know that somebody last week did ask about the different tools and what they do. Actually did have the link for Kali Linux is one that's also very widely used. But if you kind of go through here, you can sort of see, and we're going to go down. I have gone blind what's going on here. We're going to go down to this social engineering tool kit thing here. So this is kind of just quickly demonstrating how quickly you can spin up a social engineering campaign using this particular tool, and there are other ways to do it, but for the purposes of this demo we're going to using this social engineering. So social engineering toolkit, this is one kind of good because I showed some of this is morning and I was kind of glad I didn't take long. So basically, yep, it's wizard driven. So I want to do a social engineering attack, pick one, and I want to do a website attack, and I would like to get some credentials, pick 3C. We're going to throw this pretty quickly, and now it's like a nice little web template. And by the using social engineering set, yep, and IP address lookup good. And what do I want to clone these websites, but we're not gonna do that. We're just going to go down. It's look like Google. It's now just sitting there and waiting for the application starting. And if I go over here, I'm just going to draft a quick email. What could we put in here? That any information. And if I was a real social engineer person, I'd probably come up with something a little bit more convincing. Alright, and now we're going to do it, make it a button. We need a button, so do let's just do it like tables. Have you attached a malware files? So what take long getting that? And it's good button color, it's good, it's a good color, but borders is so but borders but main borders isn't there. I haven't tried this yet, but we're about to find out. And now what our normal attacker would do is they wouldn't use your IP addresses or URL, and using URL is not going to work, so it's internal. Now let's hope there's a good chance that spam will catch it, but we're about to find out, so I will just know if Google is doing its job. It's go always looks .g about to find out. And by the way, if you hit this URL is not going to work, so it's internal to me. Early, that's me, so fried. Let's hope there's a good chance that spam will catch it, but we're about to find out, so I will doing it with Google. If Google is doing its job, I'll go always look.g about to find out. Alright, so as you could say, it's come through to this Gmail account. This often happens when a real mailbox is compromised. Obviously I didn't compromise my own mailbox, I just had access to it. But now if I click on this link, what's happened here? I clicked on the link and it's taken to this page. Obviously that's not right, it's a malicious, but it's look pretty convincing, so I'm going to put it. I want to give a password just for safety purposes, so we know this isn't a test like that. So this is for social engineering set kit. Anyways, point is just finished by step. I know that's less impressive than phishing someone else. So this is for it. Welcome back, and let's start with some facts about a new tutorial about how to prevent cybersecurity, how to protect your systems against cybercrime with SAP Enterprise Threat Detection. In the following years, the several subsidiaries in Germany, UK, USA, Romania, Poland have established a distribution channel since 2013. So we work closely together with our partners all the time, and currently we have about 75 employees worldwide. And the special thing about our consultants is that they are usually certified as AP trainers. Yeah, we are specialized on AP security, where we offer consulting and our own software, the existing authorizations management suite. And as you can see, we are certified as AP partner in multiple areas, but that's enough about existing. Let's talk about enterprise threat detection. And first, I want to go over some questions. So the first question is, why did AP decide to build and operate threat detection? Two essential factors were irrelevant here. First, the customer feedback, and secondly, the technical innovations. Many customers see these SP systems as alerts regarding critical events and suspicious behavior. I mean, you can minimize the risk with a good authorization and security concept, but you still won't get altered if vulnerabilities get exploited. So if no one actively checks the logs, systems, you're kind of blind, and your experience shows that looks are often either not checked or only checked a weekly or monthly check for critical events in the security audit log is done. Furthermore, the development of the SPE HANA leverage technology for many use causes like real-time analysis of a big data, so now it is no problem to analyze log data of your whole system landscape in real time without caring about performance issues. To sum it all up in just one sentence, as AP developed ETD to provide extensive insights into your IP system landscape in real time. So the second question I want to answer is, what is enterprise ready detection? Now it is a security event management and monitoring solution which helps you to detect and analyze cyber attacks, critical events, and anomalies. You can monitor the events in your whole system landscape in real time so that you have the chance to react before damage is done. And the key questions that ETD wants to answer are, how can I keep the track of who is attacking me? What actions can I take to neutralize attacks? How do you know about into action took place? How do I find anomalies in my landscape systems? And how do I know what damage has been made in my system? So the last question that I want to answer, a basic question, is why is ETD even needed? So, for one thing, we have a rising number of internal and external attacks, and this doesn't have to be a sophisticated hack or economic like that. This might as well be an employee with too much too comprehensive authorizations who gives away sensitive data. Furthermore, we had technical difficulties. There was no tool which gave comparable transparency and insights to your SMP systems. And of course, this is also a big data issue. If you regard how many logs and events are produced at your SIP systems, if you regard the whole landscape, last but not least, you have to consider the compliance of your company. There are always new and stricter regulations and requirements regarding your data and IT security, so you must take care of prevention mechanisms, for example with authorizations and more detection mechanisms. Otherwise it is really hard to provide that vulnerabilities won't get exploited. And these excepts you have to keep in mind if you want to secure your intellectual property and sensitive data, if you want to preserve reputation, and if you want to avoid penalties and sanctions. And if that being said, I would like to start the first poll from Michael. Alright, so let's launch that poll. Question is, what issues would you address with this PDT? You know you already have it. You're planning on using it. So give us your input, please. We have about, let's see, what 20 million of people voted. So for let's see if that goes as a fair little bit. Therefore, we close the poll and show the results. Alright, so we have 49.53 now percent about it. I'm gonna close the poll and share the results. And share the results. Seems like the winner is external cyber attacks with 75%. Those statistics as well, in case you're interested. Alright, okay, that's right, interesting. External cyber attacks. Then okay, we have a look at the key features if that meets your requirements. We just had a look at the fundamental questions. Now I want to take, let's say, more technical and more in-depth look at the key features. So first we have the collection of log data and context information. That means all security related events and information are collected from your whole IP system landscape, and they are saved in one single database where it is enriched with contextual information. Semantic data model gets built up, which means you won't have to operate on the plain log text on the string. So every log entry will have a meaning and is understandable. For example, you can easily filter for every user log in it. And it is also very important to mention that user data gets pseudonymous. Well, we will see later. That means ET administrator there, since they don't know their ETA deep, so you can just surveil every person in your system landscape. Events and alerts can be monitored in real time. That means that you also immediately get alerted as soon as something suspicious happens. Well, you can start an, in this case, investigation about that incident. One of the biggest strengths, I would say, of it ideas that you can define for yourself when and why and a lot gets triggered, so you are able to freely build your own patterns, which enables you to automatically detect the text. For example, if somebody takes a look at and say a critical database table, and alerts immediately triggered, and those detection patterns run periodically or event driven, which can also be freely defined, rely on predefined routines. You can customize and optimize them to fit your needs, to your company's needs. And the last important features, the log management. That means you are able to preserve your logs in different storage types of, for example, a hot, warm and cold storage, and you are able to forward etd alarms to leading cm. Edd gets seamlessly integrated with such systems. Speaking of CM systems, so for those who heard of it and don't, security information and event management systems, and a lot of customers ask me why they even need a TD, because they all have it already have such a CM system in place. The problem is that as IP systems are rarely connected to much CM systems, even through the most important data is saved in the ASAP systems. That is now, on the one hand, because of technical difficulties, that means that same systems don't have good interfaces or connectors for SIP, and because you must connect and correlate multiple logs to get meaningful results, so there is not a, let's say, single master log file for all your SMP systems. Additionally, you get a profound know-how from SLP and customized solution for the ASP ecosystem. And in summary, like depicted at the bottom of the slide, it can be said that the focus of CM systems is at the infrastructure level. For example, route for firewall logs. This is where classical SIEM are strong and are probably ETD, but is the SIP eco other way around. So let's talk about some standard use cases that we constantly implement and that customers going to talk about all these use cases. This rather just a sort overview. One use case that appear all the time is the assignment of critical profiles and roles. The example is the assignment of SIP all on productive systems. Another standard is the change of the system configuration. For example, we have customers, then check if their profile parameters are correctly adjusted with the help of the security architect from our exciting authorizations management suite, and then on top of that, surveil with the help of EDD if somebody changes their correctly adjust profile parameters with, let's say, bad intentions. And a lot of time we monitor in company data or customer identifying data. For example, if they're downloaded, manipulated, or just viewed. And we also often monitor and log in behavior of users. Yeah, a few other use cases. SIP delivers multiple hacking detection patterns like the recognition of denial of service attacks. Your interfaces and RC cards can be monitored, and SP also delivers patterns which concentrates on the exploitation of known vulnerabilities. So if you haven't patched them yet, for example because of internal regulations or fixed patch days, you can at least monitor them with VTT, which is also sometimes called virtual patching. Now I am talking about logs all the time, and you have to ask yourself the question, how can all these events be recognized? Well, as described, everything is documented in the SIP logs. You just have to evaluate them. By default it is supports SP NetWeaver above a subpoena tree for Java, the HENA database, and the cloud platform. Not every single log on every platform is supported, as you can see. The security audit log to read access log, which enables you to log extremely customizable use cases, or the gateway log, which enables you to monitor your system interfaces. Good. Finally, another poll before we start into a live demonstration. So alright, the second one is to do you actively. Alright, if we go to 56%, let's close it and show the result. And it seems like manual is the number one, followed by no. There are only very few, only 16% do it using a CM system. Now that is a lot of manual work. We will have a look now and a live demonstration with ETD. Now how this could be done with ETD. Now, as I said before, ETD is a monitoring solution for real-time events. So as you boring, this is actually crack software, and to log in there a day as a piece system. At I'm now starting to produce logs where I'm working. So let's imagine failing scenario. I know the next is exciting employee that recently left the company, and I know that his account was logged because he left the company. So since I am any use I administrator with the comprehensive rights, I am going to unlock the user. I am going to give him a password so that I know his credentials. And finally, I am giving him ASAP all authorizations. Save it and then knock in with another user. I know this is not a sophisticated scenario, and I am currently doing nothing to cover up my tracks, but that is not what this today is about. I want to show the simple use cases and how you can handle them with EITTs. So next up, I'm having this account which was previously assigned to another new person and not to me, and I'm now looking at some critical data. For example, to use R02 you can insert any other critical, for example business relevant table. This doesn't matter for ETT. We receive it in a minute, execute it, and since I have sub all, I can see the complete user data, and of course I can also download this data, and I'm now having all user data locally with all the hash passwords which I can happily encrypt now and log off and cover up my tracks. But that's enough from the SFUO. We want to talk about ETT today and just have to look. Okay, my session ended. I just log in again with my demo user. Okay, now we created some logs into the system and we can write interface. Just look at this carefully. You have your Fiore or ETD launched in this case, so you have to launch back with all those different applications that you can start. I'm not going to show you all those applications. I want to concentrate on the most relevant ones, and one, the forensic lab is here to do digital forensics and to patterns. Most of the participants of my workshops are, let's say, a bit overwhelmed about all these pie charts and numbers and settings that you have here, but I try to make it as easy as possible for you to understand the forensic lab. So this is a split screen. As you can see here on the left hand side, you have your forensic workspace and in this forensic workspace you can filter down all the events that were recorded or collected by ETDs. So I'm currently looking at the events from the last 50 minutes. I can change that to whatever value I want or to a fixed time range. Okay, I am changing it to 30 minutes just for example, and you see that there are 4400 events in the last 30 minutes. What I can do now is I can drill down those events, I can filter those events. So maybe you can see it as a graphical query language. For example, on the right hand side I see the detail of the data that I have selected on the left hand side. Okay, so in summary I have those 4000 events, and I see here now that they are partly from as for each client 0 and partly from as for each client 100, that they different log sources and transaction log, that events are translated to different semantic events. And this is what I was talking about. You clearly see the semantics of these events. They are always translated. For example, a user admin unlocked a user or a web service was called a user logged on, and so on and so forth. And since this is a real-time solution, there are always new results coming in whenever I click the refresh bar, and you can always filter for new stuff. There are tons of filters. For example, you can look at what transactions are executed or what I am going to use next. You can look at which resource types were requested. So
what I want you to do next, that you see how the forensic workspace works, is I want to build as a small pattern. So I want to look for a database table access. That's what I am going to build now. So if I want to look for databases table access, I have to first filter those events for a certain resource type, which is of course database tables. So it doesn't matter, database tables made it to me, and I add them to the path. As you can see, those events are drilled down from 4000 to 2 events. Now we have every database table access. That's not really meaningful at the moment, so F2 I have to filter them a little bit more, and not only for the resource type, but I'm also going to filter them for the resource name, because I want to filter for critical database tables. Of course, I could enter here the resource name equals use of 0 to, but I'm going to show you another feature. The feature is very list, and here I can enter a list of values. Luckily SFP also already delivers. Anywhere you list for critical database tables, so I'm going to use the SLP standard, and I have the next filter implemented for my patterns. So what is behind these rare units that I just selected? Nothing fancy here, as the name says. It's just a list of values that was delivered by a CPS, and this regulars you can enhance them for yourself, so you can add a custom value, and that is the
I built a pattern for critical database tables. I can implement a value list, and you give me, for example, 50 database tables that are relevant for you, and the only thing that I have to do, or that you have to do later on, is to extend it a very list. So extend a very list for more tables, but this is just a concentrate example. You can use value lists in many different ways. So what I have done is now only filter down my events of my data, and I have to tell it I did that a pattern should be built and should be run. So what I can do now with this path is to create a pattern, so that this behavior gets automatically detected. I can of course give the pattern a name so that I can identify it later. For example, access to critical database table, I can set it to active. Of course, the execution output, I can choose between an indicator and an alert. Let's say an indicator is a mitigated alert, so as the name says, it just indicates something. You can choose a threshold, and you can group your results. So with the path, you choose what the y-axis should be. Now you have to define our x-axis, so I give the result a bit more meaning. Let's put it like, then I'm going to group my events. I have a system ID, I'm going to group it y, add a user pseudonym, and I'm going to group it by the resource name. Second, so all those events in this case, those are just two are now correctly grouped by a system, by the user pseudonym, and by add a resource, because otherwise every event which would throw an alert. So this is the thing that you have to do with the patterns. You have to refine them, and you have to
Eliminate false positives. For the execution, you can schedule an execution, for example, every 2 minutes, or you can trigger then whatever a defined event happens. Last but not least, to define a pattern, you can access the pattern so that a processor later on has it a bit more easier. For example, you can define this the alert severity, and that's already everything that I have to do to build a pattern who is checks the access to critical database table. And this is also pattern who is enhancer per. So what is the output of such a pattern? The output is an alert. And how can I check such an alert? You can do that. An EGD would be a lot monitor. We can have a look at all. Open your notes from the last day night now, and since this is the test system, I just have to use a filter for my pattern. Namespace that you see only my pattern executions, and yeah, you have three patterns are free alerts are triggered. So this is it, guys. Hope you guys liked it, and thanks for watching.